Why did she feel like every breath carried a secret? Why did her hands, folded neatly on the thin tray table, tremble whenever she heard the faint crackle of the intercom? She told herself it was just nerves, just a new life beginning. But somewhere deep inside, Emma Cole knew the truth. Peace never lasted long, not for her. Seat 17A wasn't glamorous. The fabric was faded, the armrest loose, and the space so narrow she had to tuck her knees to the side just to stretch. To anyone else, it was an ordinary seat on an ordinary overnight flight from Washington to London. But for Emma, it felt like the edge of two worlds, the one she had tried to bury and the one she was desperate to create. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass, staring into the black Atlantic stretched endlessly below. A silver streak of moonlight shimmered across the water, the kind of sight that usually soothed restless travelers. But Emma's reflection in the glass stole her comfort. Pale skin, tired eyes, lips pressed too tightly together. She looked like a waitress who'd worked too many late shifts, serving coffee to truck drivers and college kids in a town that forgot her the second she stepped out of uniform. That's what she wanted them to believe. The truth was heavier. Her name wasn't just Emma. Not really. Once, in a world buried under classified codes and whispered operations, she had been called Falcon, the youngest strategist in a covert Air Force program, the one who guided drones across hostile skies with nothing but a headset in her mind. She had made decisions that saved lives. She had made decisions that haunted her sleep. And then she'd walked away. For 2 years she hid inside the quiet grind of a diner job, a name tag pinned above her heart, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. She had smiled politely at customers who barely looked her way. She had counted tips late at night under the flickering light in her tiny apartment. She had convinced herself she could build something normal, something safe. But normal never erased the past, it only smothered it. Emma reached into the pocket of her jacket, fingers brushing against a folded piece of paper so worn the creases felt like scars. She didn't need to unfold it to know what it said. At the bottom, in black ink that had blurred with time, was a single word: Falcon. Her throat tightened. She shoved it back before anyone noticed, but the ghost of the word lingered. Falcon, a name she had promised never to answer again. The cabin lights dimmed as passengers settled in. A toddler whimpered, a businessman typed furiously on his laptop, and an elderly couple whispered over a crossword. Ordinary sounds of ordinary lives. No one looked twice at her. To them, she was invisible. But old instincts stirred. She noticed the slight crack in the captain's voice during his welcome. She saw the stiffness in the flight attendants' movements, the way they whispered quickly to each other when they thought no one noticed. Most passengers dismissed it. Emma couldn't. She had been trained to catch the smallest signals. Her stomach turned. She tried to breathe slowly to remind herself she wasn't Falcon anymore. She was Emma, just Emma. But fear is a strange thing. It doesn't listen to reason. The hum of the engines lulled others to sleep, but her eyes stayed open, scanning. She clutched the paperback novel she'd brought, staring at the page until the words blurred. She thought of the diner again, of the way her coworkers had laughed when she told them she was leaving for London. London, huh? Don't get lost out there, city girl. She had laughed with them, pretending it didn't sting. But she remembered how her hands trembled when she rolled that last set of silverware into a napkin, how her heart had pounded when she pocketed her last tip. She wasn't afraid of London. She was afraid of herself, afraid of what might still be alive inside her. A faint jolt shook the plane, nothing unusual, just turbulence. The seatbelt sign chimed. Passengers shifted, adjusting pillows. Emma sat upright, instincts on edge. Something about it didn't feel random. She glanced at the aisle where a flight attendant braced herself too tightly against the cart. The captain's voice returned, calm but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing some unusual air traffic activity. Please remain seated. Everything is under control." Unusual air traffic. The phrase hit her like a fist. At 30,000 feet over the Atlantic, Nothing was ever casual about unusual. Shadows swept past the windows, passengers gasped. Emma's chest clenched as she turned to look. Two F-22 Raptors glided alongside the 747, silver wings catching the moonlight. They weren't just passing by, they were escorting. The cabin erupted in murmurs, fear, confusion, a whispered "Are we at war?" a shaky voice muttering "hijackers." Emma's pulse thundered. She knew better. The Air Force didn't scramble Raptors for coincidence. If they were here, it was because of something or someone. The intercom crackled, but it wasn't the captain. "This is Eagle 1 to Flight 982. Passenger manifest confirms. Repeat. Confirm the presence of Falcon aboard." Silence crushed the cabin. Dozens of eyes turned, searching for meaning. Falcon. A man muttered the word like a question. Another passenger asked if it was a code. Emma's skin burned. Her breath caught. Her old name had been pulled out of the dark, spoken into the night sky for everyone to hear. The waitress in seat 17A was gone. At least, she would be if she dared to answer. Her seatmate, a woman in her 50s, leaned closer, whispering nervously, "You don't think there's someone important on board, do you?" Emma forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure it's nothing." But inside, her heart screamed the truth. It was everything. The Raptors tilted, signaling. Emma recognized it instantly. It wasn't for the captain. It wasn't for the passengers. It was for her. The intercom roared again, sharper this time. "Falcon, do you copy? This is command. Respond immediately." Emma's hands dug into the armrests, knuckles white, her throat dried. She wanted to stay still, to let the silence protect her, but silence wouldn't last. They knew she was here. The question wasn't if she would be exposed, it was when. Memories flooded her, walking away from the base, leaving her uniform folded neatly in a locker, telling herself she'd never hear that call sign again. Yet here it was, echoing at 30,000 feet, pulling her back into a life she had tried to bury beneath diner grease and tired smiles. The woman beside her frowned, watching her pale face. "Are you okay?" Emma nodded quickly, too quickly. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the seat until she was invisible again. But Falcon wasn't invisible. Falcon was a beacon, and they had just lit the skis with her name. She closed her eyes, gripping the seatbelt so tightly it dug into her palm. Maybe if she stayed silent, maybe if she pretended, they'd let it go. Maybe they had the wrong person. But Emma knew the truth. They never made mistakes with call signs. Her breath trembled, her chest ached. She wasn't Falcon anymore. She was just Emma Cole, waitress from Virginia. But the skis didn't care who she wanted to be. The Raptors circled closer, waiting, relentless. And in that moment, as fear pulsed through the cabin, Emma realized the past she thought she buried wasn't gone. It was circling above, metallic wings cutting through the night, whispering the name she couldn't escape. Falcon. Why was the captain walking straight toward her row? Why did his eyes linger on her just a fraction longer than anyone else? Emma Cole's pulse quickened as every possibility raced through her mind. Deny it. Pretend. Stay small, stay invisible. That's what she wanted to do, but invisibility doesn't last when the sky itself is calling your name. "Miss Cole," the captain said quietly, though half the cabin still heard him. Heads turned. Dozens of pairs of eyes pinned her in place. "If you'll come with me." The woman in the seat beside her gasped softly. "They mean you." Emma's stomach dropped. She wanted to say no, to laugh it off, to play dumb, but the truth hung heavy in the air. The Raptors outside weren't circling for fun. They hadn't mistaken her name. They knew. And now everyone else knew too, or at least suspected enough to fear her. Her knees felt unsteady as she unbuckled the belt and stood. Whispers rippled through the cabin like electricity. "Who is she?" someone muttered. "Falcon? What's Falcon?" A man in business attire crossed his arms tightly, as if shielding himself from whatever truth was about to be revealed. Emma kept her eyes forward, refusing to look at anyone. The walk down the aisle felt endless. The weight of her past dragged behind every step. She could feel the passengers' stares burning holes through her jacket, judging, questioning, terrified. She wasn't a soldier to them. She was Falcon. She was just a waitress being escorted toward something none of them understood. The galley near the cockpit was cramped, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made the captain's face look older, more fragile. He closed the door behind them, shutting out the murmur of passengers. The sudden silence pressed against her ears. "Miss Cole," he said, his voice low, tense. "The pilots outside, they've been very clear. They claim you're someone called Falcon." His jaw tightened, eyes scanning her face as though searching for the truth she didn't want to give. "Are they right?" Emma's hands shook. Her throat felt dry as sand. She wanted to lie. She wanted to tell him they had the wrong person, that she was just a tired waitress on her way to London for a new start. But she saw the desperation in his eyes, the flicker of fear that told her he already knew the answer. She inhaled sharply. "I used to be Falcon," she whispered. The captain blinked, his face flickering between disbelief and dread. "Used to be." Emma nodded, fingers trembling. "It was a call sign. I was part of a classified Air Force program. Remote drone strategy, combat navigation, tactical overrides. They gave me that name, Falcon." The flight attendants who had followed them exchanged uneasy glances. One hugged her arms around herself as though bracing against a storm. The captain leaned closer, his voice sharper now. "If that's true, why are they here? Why are they calling for you? You're a waitress, aren't you? Just a civilian passenger." Emma let out a breathless laugh, bitter and hollow. "That's what I've been trying to be. Civilian, normal, but you don't forget a call sign like Falcon. You don't just walk away and disappear. Apparently, neither do they." The captain rubbed his temples, his frustration clear. "They wouldn't scramble Raptors over the Atlantic for nostalgia. What exactly do they want from you?" Before Emma could answer, the intercom in the galley crackled to life, cutting through the tension. "Falcon, this is command. The situation has escalated. You are ordered to respond immediately. Lives are at stake." The words chilled her to the bone. Not a drill, not a symbolic gesture, not a casual call. Lives at stake. Emma's breath caught. The Falcon part of her, the strategist buried beneath waitress uniforms and greasy diner floors, was already waking up. She hated how quickly it returned, how natural it felt to calculate, to analyze, to prepare. The captain grabbed the intercom mic, his voice stiff. "This is Captain Reynolds of Flight 982. Can you clarify what lives are at stake? What do you need from us?" The reply was cold, direct, and left no space for misinterpretation. "Not from you, Captain. From Falcon. Put her on." The silence that followed was deafening. The flight attendants stared at Emma like she was some puzzle they couldn't solve, some weapon they didn't understand. The captain's eyes were fixed on her, equal parts pleading and demanding. Emma's hands shook as she reached toward the mic, then froze. Her heart screamed no. She wanted to stay silent, to let Falcon stay buried forever. But then she saw the helpless fear in the captain's face, the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. Every life on this plane hung on her decision. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she wasn't just Emma anymore. "This is Falcon," she said into the mic, her voice low but steady. For a heartbeat, the world was silent. Then Eagle One's voice came back, softer this time, almost relieved. "Welcome back, Falcon. We knew you couldn't hide forever." Her blood ran cold. The captain's eyes widened, but he said nothing. Emma pulled her jacket tighter, shivering though the air wasn't cold. Whatever was happening, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And the waitress in seat 17A was gone. Falcon had returned. The cockpit door opened with a hiss, and Emma was ushered inside. The glow of the controls, the blinking lights, the hum of urgent voices. She hadn't seen this world in years, but it felt disturbingly familiar. The first officer glanced at her nervously, as though unsure whether to trust her or fear her. Captain Reynolds gripped the yoke with white knuckles, sweat beading on his forehead. The radio crackled, Eagle 1 again, firm but calm. Falcon, the I-system breach has been confirmed. The override codes are in your files. You're the only one trained to restabilize this flight path. If you don't act, Flight 982 will not reach its destination. Emma's stomach turned to ice. A breach. Not mechanical failure, not turbulence. Someone, somewhere, had hijacked the aircraft's navigation systems remotely, and she knew exactly how. Years ago, she had worked on a classified project, a cyber weapon capable of seizing control of planes mid-flight. She had helped design the countermeasures, the emergency overrides. And now that knowledge was the only thing standing between survival and catastrophe. Captain Reynolds looked at her, voice trembling. "Is this true? Can you fix this?" Emma hesitated. The waitress in her wanted to scream no, to curl back into the safety of anonymity. But Falcon was already awake, already scanning the flashing warnings on the panels. The autopilot was glitching. The navigation system was looping erratically. If she didn't intervene, the aircraft would drift into restricted airspace. Or worse. "Yes," she said finally, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "I can fix this. But once I do, I won't be Emma Cole anymore. I'll be Falcon again. And that's something I swore I'd never be." The captain's eyes pleaded with her. "Miss Cole, if you don't, 211 souls on this plane may not live to see tomorrow. Whatever Falcon is, whatever you used to be, we need her now." The words pierced through her hesitation. She thought of the passengers, the toddler clutching a toy, the elderly couple doing crosswords, the woman with kind eyes who sat beside her in 17B. Their lives weren't numbers. They were faces. Faces she had passed in the aisle, faces she had tried to ignore. Her breath trembled. She slid into the co-pilot's seat, her hands hovering over the controls. Memories surged. Nights in windowless rooms. Strings of code typed with aching fingers. Missions where silence was heavier than explosions. It all came back too easily, as if Falcon had been waiting just beneath the surface. Emma reached into her jacket again, pulling out the folded letter she had carried for years. The one with her old clearance codes. Her lifeline to the past she wanted to forget. Her fingers shook as she typed the sequence into the navigation override. The cockpit beeped angrily, resisting. Then, slowly, red warnings shifted to amber, then to green. The aircraft leveled out above the Atlantic. Emma exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath. On the radio, Eagle 1's voice softened. "Copy that, Falcon. Flight path stabilized. You just saved a plane full of lives again." Her chest tightened. Relief was drowned by dread. She leaned toward the mic. "Who did this? Who breached us?" Silence. Then the chilling reply. "Unknown hostile actors. But they knew about you, Falcon. They baited you. And now they know you're back." Emma's blood ran cold. Captain Reynolds removed his headset, speaking low. "You saved us. But if what they're saying is true, you may have just painted a target on yourself." She didn't respond. She looked through the cockpit window at the Raptors, silent guardians slicing through the night. They weren't here for the plane. They were here for her. And in that moment, Emma Cole whispered to herself words no one else could hear. "My name is Emma, but out there I'll always be Falcon." Why hadn't she walked away when she had the chance? Why did she let her hand touch the mic, her voice slip out into the night sky, answering to a name she swore she'd never hear again? Emma Cole sat rigid in the co-pilot's chair, the glow of the instrument panel washing her face in pale light. Falcon. The name was alive again, and with it, the weight of everything she had tried so hard to bury. The aircraft was stable now, leveled out at 30,000 feet, gliding silently above the Atlantic. To the passengers in the cabin, it probably felt like the danger had passed. But Emma knew better. Danger wasn't measured in turbulence or altitude. It was measured in silence, the kind of silence where hostile actors watch from the dark, waiting for her to make her next move. Captain Reynolds exhaled shakily, running a hand over his damp forehead. Whatever you just did, it worked. But they said hostile actors, didn't they? Who are we dealing with? Terrorists. A rival state. Emma's jaw tightened. If they breached the ice system, it's not amateurs. This wasn't a stunt. Someone out there had the codes. They baited me, forced me to respond. The first officer turned, his voice cautious, almost afraid. But why you? Why call for you specifically? Emma didn't answer right away. Her fingers brushed against the folded letter in her jacket pocket. She remembered the day it had arrived, slipped under her apartment door in Virginia. No sender, no return address. Just one word scrawled at the bottom in ink that bled through the paper: Falcon. She had never told anyone about it. Not her coworkers, not the landlord who found her too quiet, not the kind waitress who once asked if she had family nearby. Emma had ignored it, stuffed it in her pocket, tried to forget. But whoever sent it, they knew. Her voice was low, almost reluctant. I walked away from the program years ago, but not everyone wanted me to. Someone kept track. Someone wanted to know if I'd answer to Falcon again. The captain frowned. And now you have. Emma's chest tightened. He was right. She had answered. And the moment she spoke that call sign into the radio, every shadow listening out there now knew Falcon was alive. The intercom buzzed again, startling the first officer. Eagle One's voice was firm, clipped. Falcon, listen carefully. The breach originated east of your current flight path. Signals indicate triangulation from within European airspace. Repeat, hostile control is on the ground ahead of you. Emma leaned forward, her pulse pounding. Europe, London, the very place she was running toward for a fresh start, the very place she thought she could disappear. Now it was waiting with claws outstretched. Her thoughts spiraled. She saw faces from the past, mentors who warned her not to get too close to the program, colleagues who joked about how call signs followed you to the grave. She remembered one officer in particular, a man who had leaned across a desk and told her, "You don't just resign from shadows, Falcon. Shadows resign you." Her stomach turned. Captain Reynolds shifted uneasily. They're not just after the plane, are they? Emma's eyes locked on the green glow of the navigation panel. No, they're after me. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. The first officer swallowed hard, as though he wished he hadn't heard the answer. In the cabin beyond the cockpit door, passengers murmured faintly, unaware of the storm swirling in the front of the aircraft. Children cried. A woman laughed too loudly, nervously, trying to keep her family calm. To them, Emma was still invisible, just another face. They would never know how close they were to losing everything. The radio hissed again. Eagle One's tone was urgent now. Falcon, command requests immediate authorization. We're transmitting an encrypted sequence. Confirm receipt. Emma's eyes flickered. She remembered that tone. Orders disguised as requests. Demands hidden inside clipped sentences. The Air Force had trained her to respond without hesitation, without pause. But she wasn't in a bunker anymore. She wasn't wearing a headset in a locked room. She was in a commercial aircraft full of ordinary lives. Her hand hovered over the radio, fingers trembling. She closed her eyes, whispering inside her mind, "Don't answer. Don't be Falcon." But the captain's voice cut through her hesitation. "Miss Cole, if they're asking for you, it means they don't trust anyone else. Whatever you know, whatever you carry, it's bigger than this plane." Emma bit down on the inside of her cheek, tasting iron. She remembered the long nights, the impossible choices. Every time she guided a drone across hostile skies, she had told herself she was saving lives. But the faces of those who weren't saved always came back. Always. Her chest ached with an old question. How many lives do you save before the cost is too high? She pressed the button. Her voice was quiet, steady. "Falcon, copy, receiving transmission." The cockpit filled with the hiss of static before a string of numbers bled through, rapid and encrypted. Emma scribbled them onto the corner of a flight chart with shaking hands. She recognized the sequence, not just a code, a test, a way to measure if she was still the same Falcon who once ran simulations faster than machines. Her eyes scanned the numbers, her mind calculating instinctively. Old training resurfaced, muscle memory she didn't want but couldn't kill. She rearranged the sequence, fingers tapping against the chart. Then her breath caught. It wasn't a random code, it was coordinates. She looked up sharply. They're not warning us, they're pointing us. Captain Reynolds frowned. Pointing us where? Emma's voice dropped, toward whoever's pulling the strings. The realization sat heavy in the room. This wasn't just about keeping Flight 982 safe. It was about luring her in. The breach wasn't an accident. It was a message, a hand reaching out from the dark, daring her to respond. The first officer's voice shook. If we follow those coordinates, aren't we walking into a trap? Emma swallowed hard. Yes, but if we don't, they'll come for us anyway. They've already proven they can reach inside this plane. If they want me, they'll keep pushing until they get me. And if they're willing to risk 200 lives to flush me out, she trailed off, staring at the glowing numbers. Then they won't stop at one plane. The captain's hands gripped the yoke tighter, his jaw clenched. So what do we do? Emma stared at the paper, the ink smudging slightly under her trembling fingers. Part of her wanted to crumple it, to throw it away, to scream that she wasn't Falcon anymore. She wanted to go back to pouring coffee, to late nights at the diner where the biggest threat was a broken jukebox. But the truth was merciless. That life had been borrowed time. Her reflection in the cockpit glass caught her eye, tired, pale, haunted. She whispered to herself, so low no one else could hear. I wanted to be Emma, just Emma. The Raptors outside kept pace with the plane, silent guardians slicing through the night. But Emma knew they weren't protecting the passengers. They were circling her. The radio crackled once more. Eagle One's voice sharpened. Falcon, confirm course correction. Command needs an answer now. Her hands trembled on the paper. Every choice felt like a betrayal of herself, of the passengers, of the normal life she'd tried to build. But she also knew what silence cost. Silence killed. She looked at the captain, his eyes desperate but trusting. She looked at the first officer, his fear poorly hidden beneath protocol. And she thought of the passengers, the child clutching a stuffed bear, the woman who whispered nervously beside her seat. They didn't deserve the shadow chasing her. Emma inhaled slowly, steadying herself. Course correction confirmed. The words slipped out like a confession. The cockpit went silent. The aircraft's nose shifted slightly, aligning with the new path. And with it, Emma felt the weight of inevitability pressing harder against her chest. She had just chosen to step back into the shadows she swore she'd escaped. Somewhere ahead, beyond the Atlantic night, someone was waiting for Falcon. And Emma Cole, waitress, runaway, survivor, knew she was flying straight toward them. What waited for her on the other side of the ocean? Was it safety, or a trap carefully laid years in advance? Emma Cole sat in the cockpit, her fingers still trembling after confirming the course correction. The numbers on the screen glowed steady now, but inside her, everything shook. The cabin behind her was calm enough on the surface. Passengers settled back into uneasy silence, most believing the turbulence had passed, that the fighter jets outside were just precaution. But Emma knew better. Calm was only the surface. Storms built beneath silence, and this storm was circling her name. Falcon. Captain Reynolds exhaled slowly, as though trying to force normalcy back into the air. So, what happens now? We just follow their orders. Emma's gaze lingered on the coordinates she had scribbled earlier. Her throat felt tight. We don't have a choice. Whoever breached the system, they're not testing us. They're leading us. If we ignore it, they'll escalate. They'll remind us what they can do. The first officer rubbed his temple. How do you know that? Emma's eyes flicked toward him. For a moment she considered lying, hiding the truth. But lies had no weight here. Only the truth explained why Raptors had been scrambled, why the Air Force had demanded Falcon by name. "Because I helped design the system they just hijacked," she whispered. The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. The first officer's expression hardened. Captain Reynolds stared at her, stunned. "You built this?" the captain asked. "Not the breach itself, the system, the defense protocols, the overrides. We believed it couldn't be cracked, but if someone has access now," her voice faltered, "then they've been watching me longer than I thought." The silence that followed pressed against her chest. She hated the way their eyes shifted, like she wasn't just a passenger anymore, but a weapon someone had slipped onto their plane. She turned her gaze back to the controls, steadying herself. "Look, I walked away from that life. I wanted quiet. I wanted to be Emma Cole, just a waitress. But the moment they used Falcon's name, it was over. They know I'm alive. They know I'll respond if lives are at stake." The captain shook his head. "Why you? Why not someone else? Surely you weren't the only strategist." Emma's lips pressed into a thin line. Memories surged, dark rooms filled with glowing screens, voices over headsets, orders handed down like stones. She remembered being the youngest at the table, the one they all doubted until she outpaced them, until she became indispensable. "They didn't trust many people with the fail-safes," she said quietly. "But they trusted me. I was Falcon because I never missed, because when the systems failed, I didn't." The weight of those words crushed her chest. She remembered the pride she once felt hearing her call sign echo through the comms. She also remembered the sleepless nights, the faces of civilians caught in the crossfire, the lives lost when her calculations hadn't been enough. The first officer finally spoke, his tone low. "And now they're dragging you back." Emma didn't answer. She didn't need to. Outside the window, the raptors flew steady, their wings slicing through the black sky like silent blades. Guardians or prison guards, it was hard to tell. The radio hissed again. Eagle One's voice carried no warmth this time. "Falcon, command requests operational readiness. Be advised, hostile triangulation suggests interception attempt upon European entry. You are to remain active." Captain Reynolds frowned. "Interception, you mean another aircraft?" The voice on the radio ignored him. "Falcon, confirm status." Emma closed her eyes, inhaling. Every fiber of her wanted to stay silent, but silence wasn't an option anymore. She pressed the button. "Falcon, copy, active." Her voice didn't sound like hers anymore. It sounded like the ghost she had tried to bury. The captain leaned back in his chair, muttering under his breath, "God help us." Emma's chest tightened. She thought of the passengers again, their ordinary lives, their unknowing trust. They believed this flight was a bridge to vacations, business meetings, reunions. They had no idea they were pawns in something darker. She wanted to tell herself she was still one of them. Just Emma, traveling for a new beginning. But that lie dissolved the moment she touched the radio. Her mind drifted back to the diner, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of the fryer, the laughter of coworkers who never really saw her. She had worn that life like armor, convincing herself it was enough. But now she saw it clearly. It had never been her escape. It had only been her hiding place. "Falcon," the voice on the radio returned, sharper now. "Command has confirmation. Hostile network intends to broadcast Falcon's exposure. Repeat, they intend to expose your identity globally. Prepare for contingency." Emma's heart lurched. Exposure. The word cut deeper than any weapon. Captain Reynolds turned sharply. "What does that mean?" Emma's hand gripped the armrest. "It means they're not just after this plane. They're after me. They want the world to know who Falcon is." The first officer shook his head. "But you're not even active duty anymore. Why would that matter?" Emma's voice dropped. "Because once Falcon is public, every hostile group that wants leverage will know exactly who to hunt. And they won't stop at me. They'll go after anyone close. Anyone I ever knew." A cold silence filled the cockpit. The captain's voice hardened. Then we can't let that happen. We'll keep you hidden, we'll. No, Emma cut him off, her voice steady now. They already know I'm here. Hiding isn't an option. The only way to stop this is to confront them before they control the story. The first officer looked at her, disbelief in his eyes. Confront them? You mean walk straight into whatever trap they've set? Emma didn't blink. Yes, because if I don't, the trap won't just be for me. It'll be for all of us. Her words settled like stone. The captain looked away, his jaw tight. For a long stretch, the only sound was the steady hum of the engines, the faint crackle of the radio, the quiet breathing of three people who knew too much. Finally, Emma whispered to herself, so soft it almost vanished in the drone of the plane. I never wanted this again. I never wanted to be Falcon. But the truth was undeniable. She was Falcon, whether she liked it or not. The minutes dragged as the aircraft pressed eastward, the horizon still black. Emma stared at the faint glow of stars, her reflection superimposed against them. She wondered if anyone in the cabin knew how fragile their world had become. She wondered if any of them could feel the trap tightening. Her chest ached with a thought she hated. What if this was always where I was meant to end up? Not at the diner, not pouring coffee, but here, in the sky between life and death, carrying a name I couldn't escape. She whispered again, but this time there was no bitterness, only resignation. Falcon. The raptors outside tilted their wings slightly, as though they had heard her. And somewhere ahead, beyond the quiet ocean and the sleeping passengers, Emma knew the trap was waiting. Not for a waitress, not for a diner girl from Virginia. For Falcon. What if the past wasn't behind her at all? What if every mile east only pulled her deeper into it? Emma Cole sat in the cockpit of Flight 982, the quiet glow of instruments painting her face in green and amber. On the surface, everything looked calm. Altitude steady, course corrected, passengers sleeping. But calm, she knew, was only a disguise. Falcon had been called back into the sky, and the sky was where traps were set. Eagle One's last words echoed like a warning she couldn't shake. They intend to expose you. Prepare for contingency. Exposure meant death, not just for her, but for anyone who had ever stood beside her. Captain Reynolds leaned forward, his voice low. We're closing in on European entry airspace. They said interception attempt, didn't they? What exactly does that mean? Emma's eyes flicked to the radar sweep. It means they won't just let us pass. If hostile actors have control this deep, they'll make their move before we land, force a diversion, push us into restricted skis, or worse. The first officer rubbed his jaw, his expression taut with disbelief. You're saying someone out there might try to bring this plane down, over Europe? Emma didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence between them said enough. Her mind flicked back unbidden to another silence. Years earlier, a darkened operations room, a wall of screens flickering with grainy satellite feeds. She remembered the hum of electronics, the faint smell of burnt coffee, the officer at her side whispering, "If you hesitate, Falcon, they'll die. If you act, others will." That night she hadn't hesitated. She had chosen. She had saved a convoy pinned under fire. But in the aftermath, reports came in. Collateral, civilians caught in the strike zone. Their names were never spoken, only the numbers. Falcon had carried those numbers ever since. Her hand clenched against the armrest now, as though gripping that memory to keep it from breaking her. The captain's voice cut through. Falcon, Emma, whatever name you want, what do we do if they try something? Emma forced her breathing steady. We survive, that's it. That's the only mission now. The radio hissed suddenly, jarring them all. A new voice, not Eagle One, not familiar, not friendly. The accent was clipped, distorted through static. Flight 982, your path is compromised. Adjust heading to 045 immediately. Failure to comply will result in consequences. The captain frowned, reaching for the mic. Emma stopped him with a sharp shake of her head. Don't, she whispered. He froze. Why not? Because they're not talking to you. They're talking to me. Her pulse hammered. She pressed the transmit button, her voice firm but measured. This is Falcon. Identify yourself. A low chuckle crackled through the speaker, jagged with interference. So the bird does answer. We wondered how long you hide. The cockpit fell silent. Captain Reynolds stared, his face pale. The first officer's hands hovered uselessly over the controls. Emma's throat tightened. The voice was unfamiliar, but the tone was. That confidence, that cruel satisfaction. Whoever it was, they had been waiting for this moment. What do you want? She demanded. What's owed, the voice said simply. Your life for the systems you built. You abandoned the shadows, Falcon, but the shadows didn't abandon you. Her stomach turned. A trap, just as she feared. They hadn't hijacked the system just to destabilize the plane. They had done it to draw her out, to force her into the open where the world could hear her name. The radio clicked dead. For a moment, the only sound was the steady thrum of engines and the faint hiss of static. Then the radar beeped, once, twice. A new signal blinking on the screen, another aircraft fast, closing distance. Emma's chest tightened. Interception, she whispered. The first officer's voice cracked. That's not one of ours, is it? Outside, the Raptors banked sharply, engines roaring as they shifted into protective formation. Their silver wings glinted against the faint glow of dawn breaking along the horizon. Emma leaned toward the glass. At first nothing, just empty sky. Then a shadow, sleek, predatory, a jet cutting across their path, its lights dark, its shape unfamiliar but menacing. It wasn't an escort, it was a hunter. Captain Reynolds muttered a prayer under his breath. The radio sparked again, the same distorted voice mocking now. 045 Falcon, adjust your course, or we adjust it for you. Emma's breath trembled. She could feel the captain's eyes on her, waiting for direction. The weight of 200 lives pressed against her chest. Inside her, the waitress screamed to stay silent, to let someone else decide. But Falcon, the strategist, the soldier, was already awake, calculating probabilities, reading the angles, mapping survival. She pressed the transmit. This is Falcon. If you want me, you don't touch the passengers. They know nothing. They're not part of this. A pause, then laughter, hollow and sharp. Passengers are leverage, Falcon. You taught us that once. Did you forget? Her stomach dropped. Whoever they were, they knew more than they should. Not just about her systems, about her. Captain Reynolds' knuckles whitened on the yoke. They'll kill us all, he whispered. Emma shook her head, forcing steel into her voice. Not if I give them what they want. The first officer spun toward her. You can't mean that. Emma's eyes burned with conflict. If they think they can take me, they'll back off the plane. They need me alive. That's their game. The captain looked at her in horror. You'd sacrifice yourself. Emma swallowed hard. I'd protect them. Her chest ached. The words felt heavy, final. She remembered the diner again, the laughter, the grease, the small kindness of strangers who never knew her name. She remembered believing she could be ordinary, but maybe ordinary was never hers to keep. The radar beeped again. 2 more signals, more aircraft closing in. The Raptors outside streaked across the sky, engines burning as they prepared for confrontation. Emma pressed the radio again. If I comply, if I adjust course, what guarantee do I have you'll leave the others unharmed? The voice came back calm, almost amused. Guarantee? Falcon, you of all people know better. There are no guarantees. The cockpit froze. Emma's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. Then I won't comply. Silence. Then the chilling reply, so be it. The radar lit up. The hostile jet shifted, closing distance fast. The Raptors roared in response, moving to intercept. The plane shuddered as turbulence rippled across the wings. Passengers stirred in the cabin, murmuring nervously. A child cried. No one knew the battle forming outside their windows. Emma gripped the console, her mind racing. She couldn't fight them with weapons, but she could fight them with something else: strategy, calculations. The one thing Falcon had always carried. She leaned forward, eyes on the screen. "Captain, keep her steady. Don't engage. If we panic, they win. If we follow, they win. We need to outlast them until backup arrives." The captain swallowed. "And if backup doesn't come?" Emma's jaw set. "Then Falcon finishes what she started." The engines roared, the sky ahead flickered with shadows of jets maneuvering into position. And in the reflection of the cockpit glass, Emma saw herself not as the tired waitress from Virginia, but as the strategist who had once been feared, trusted, hunted. Falcon. Her past wasn't waiting for her on the ground anymore. It was here, in the sky, demanding to be answered. And Emma Cole knew she was out of time to run. How many times could a person choose between lives before the choices consumed them? How many times could Falcon gamble with survival before the weight broke her? Emma Cole gripped the console in the cockpit as the radar lit up with hostile signals. 3 aircraft now. Raptors held formation outside, engines burning, ready to fight. The passengers behind the cockpit door still believed in calm. They thought turbulence was the worst they'd face. But the real turbulence was here, unseen, in the clash of voices and shadows fighting over a single name. "Falcon." Captain Reynolds' voice cracked. "They'll fire on us. They'll bring us down over open water." Emma's eyes narrowed, scanning the blinking signals. "Not yet. They need leverage. They won't risk killing me until they know they can't control me." The first officer snapped, fear sharpening his words. "And if you're wrong, if they don't care about keeping you alive?" Emma's jaw tightened. "Then this ends in the ocean. But if I'm right, we have time, not much, but enough." Outside, dawn had begun bleeding across the horizon, a faint gold strip above the Atlantic. It should have been beautiful. To Emma, it looked like a battlefield. Her pulse hammered. The numbers on the radar blurred for a moment, her vision slipping, not from exhaustion but from memory. She was back in another cockpit once. Not a passenger jet but the cold steel of an ops chair in Nevada. A mission years ago. The hum of servers, the faint hiss of comms. A village on the screen, children darting between rooftops, unaware that drones circled above. She had been Falcon then, eyes sharp, voice steady, fingers on the console. Target approaching, coordinates locked, Falcon, confirmed strike authority. Her chest had ached even then. She had seen the convoy approaching, fighters armed, ready to level the village. She had calculated the window. Strike now, save dozens. Hesitate, lose them all. But she had also seen the civilians. Farmers, children, faces staring at the sky, oblivious to the invisible predator above them. "Falcon," the commander's voice had pressed. "Confirm strike." Her hand had hovered, her throat dry. She whispered the numbers and the missile flew. The fighters died, the convoy was halted, dozens were saved. But when the smoke cleared, she saw the other faces. The collateral, the cost. Numbers, always numbers, but Falcon never forgot the faces. The memory ripped away as the cockpit shook violently. Emma gasped, clutching the armrest. A shadow streaked past the window, one of the hostile jets, banking dangerously close, cutting the air with a sonic boom that rattled the plane. Passengers screamed faintly in the cabin beyond. The first officer cursed under his breath. "They're hurting us." Emma steadied herself, voice sharp. "Exactly. They don't want destruction, they want compliance. They want me." The radio crackled again. The distorted voice returned, calm, cruel. "Falcon, this is your final chance. Adjust heading. 045, do not test our patience." Captain Reynolds looked at her, eyes wide, pleading. "If we don't comply, they'll fire. You heard him." Emma's chest tightened. Every part of her screamed to resist, to refuse. But then she thought of the passengers again. The woman with kind eyes, the toddler clutching a bear, The elderly couple whispering crosswords. They hadn't chosen this. They hadn't chosen her. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Captain, prepare evasive maneuvers. If they fire, we won't survive a hit. But if we show compliance, we might buy time. The first officer's eyes widened. You mean actually turn? Emma nodded slowly. A slight deviation, just enough to look like obedience, but not enough to surrender. Captain Reynolds' knuckles whitened. That's a dangerous gamble. Emma's voice dropped. Falcon's life was always a gamble. The radio hissed again. The hostile voice sharpened. 10 seconds, Falcon, adjust, or we adjust for you. Emma exhaled, feeling the countdown like a drumbeat in her veins. She closed her eyes, whispering silently, this isn't about me. This is about them. All of them. Captain, she said firmly, eyes opening. Turn 5 degrees now. He obeyed. The aircraft tilted a subtle shift, enough to register, enough to appease. The radio crackled once more. The voice was smug. Good bird, maybe you can still be taught. Emma's stomach turned. Rage surged in her chest. She hated how they spoke her call sign as though it belonged to them, as though Falcon was theirs to command. Outside, one hostile jet banked away, circling wide. The Raptors mirrored, guarding tight. The captain glanced at her, whispering, they bought it. Emma shook her head. No, they're just waiting. They're watching how far I'll bend before I break. The cockpit fell into tense silence. The steady hum of the engines felt like a heartbeat, fragile and thin. Emma stared through the glass, her reflection staring back. She didn't look like a waitress anymore. She didn't look like Emma Cole. She looked like Falcon again. Tired, haunted, but unbroken. Her mind whispered back to that mission, the one she never forgot. She had told herself the strike was necessary, that she had saved more lives than she lost, but the faces of the civilians haunted her every night since. They didn't see Falcon as a savior. They saw Falcon as death. And now, somewhere in the skis, her enemies saw her as something else entirely. A trophy, a prize, a ghost dragged back to life. The first officer's voice broke the silence. How long can we keep this up? How long before they realize we're stalling? Emma's eyes hardened. Not long, which means when they push again, we don't just react, we move first. The captain frowned. Move first with what? We don't have weapons, Emma. This isn't a fighter jet. Her voice dropped to a whisper. No, but we have me. Both men looked at her, confused. She leaned closer to the console, scanning the systems. The breach wasn't total anymore. Her override had patched enough for basic control, but deeper layers, navigation, communication, remained vulnerable, and that gave her an idea. Risky, reckless, but Falcon had always lived in the space between. If I can piggyback their signal, she murmured, half to herself, I can send false telemetry, feed them what they expect to see while we chart a different path. The first officer blinked. You can do that. Emma hesitated. Her hands shook as she touched the folded letter in her pocket, the one she had carried for years. Inside it were codes, fragments of a life she had tried to bury, a lifeline, a curse. Yes, she whispered, but once I do, they'll know Falcon isn't just alive. They'll know Falcon is fighting back. The captain's gaze was heavy, and that paints a target. Emma looked through the glass at the Raptors holding steady outside, at the hostile shadows circling. Her reflection stared back, haunted eyes, clenched jaw, the ghost of a soldier who never left the war. They already have their target, she said softly. The cockpit fell into silence. Emma's fingers hovered over the keys, her mind racing. She remembered the faces again, the children in that village, the civilians she hadn't saved, the way she swore never to sit at a console again. Her throat tightened. I never wanted to be Falcon again. But as the hostile jets circled closer, as the Raptors prepared to intercept, as 200 passengers slept unknowingly just behind her, Emma knew there was no choice. Falcon was alive, and Falcon was about to fight. Why were the passengers so calm? Why did they keep pretending that nothing unusual was happening? Emma Cole sat in the cockpit, staring at the hostile signals circling on the radar, and wondered if ignorance was mercy. Behind the cockpit door, life went on in whispers and fidgeting. A child cried once, then was hushed by a lullaby. Someone coughed. An attendant rolled a cart, her smile forced and thin. But calm was only the surface. Underneath, unease spread like cracks in glass. Falcon knew. She could almost feel the weight of their questions pressing through the walls. Why were military jets outside their windows? Why did the captain leave the cockpit earlier and return pale, shaken? Why had a waitress from seat 17A been called forward by name? The truth would destroy them, so they were left with silence. In seat 17B, the woman with kind eyes stared at the empty space beside her. She had watched Emma stand, walk the aisle, disappear into the front of the plane. She whispered to herself, almost a prayer, "Come back." In row 22, the businessman who had scoffed at turbulence now gripped his armrest so tightly his knuckles ached. He'd overheard fragments. Falcon lives at stake. He told himself it was nothing, just codes, but his heart didn't believe it. And near the back, a boy of 12 leaned against the window, staring in awe at the raptors streaking through the dawn. "Mom," he whispered, "are we in a movie?" His mother's lips trembled as she lied. "Yes, sweetheart, just a movie." But Emma knew. This wasn't a movie, this wasn't turbulence. This was war, silent, invisible, and personal. The cockpit shuddered again as a hostile jet cut close, its wake jolting the fuselage. Passengers gasped, voices rising. The first officer muttered a curse. Captain Reynolds gripped the yoke, sweat sliding down his temple. "They're pushing us again," he said. Emma's eyes stayed locked on the console. "Then it's time we push back." She reached into her jacket, pulling out the folded letter that had haunted her for years. The ink was smudged, the paper fragile, but the codes inside were still alive, waiting. She unfolded it carefully, laying it across the console like a relic. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her pulse raced. She whispered to herself, "This will burn everything. There's no going back." "Falcon," Captain Reynolds' voice was low, hesitant. "What are you doing?" Emma didn't look up, feeding them lies. The first officer frowned. "What?" Her eyes flicked to the radar. "They're watching us, monitoring every signal, every correction. But if I can feed false telemetry, make them believe we're bending when we're not, I can buy us a corridor out. A chance." The captain's voice was sharp with disbelief. "You can trick them." Emma's jaw tightened. "I built the system they're using. I know its blind spots. The only one who can beat Falcon is Falcon." Her chest ached at her own words. She had buried Falcon, tried to drown her in grease-stained uniforms and late shifts at a diner. But Falcon lived in her fingers, in her mind, in the cold calculation she could never erase. She typed swiftly, her hands trembling but precise. Strings of code filled the screen, sequences bending, refracting. She layered false data, weaving illusions into the stream. To the hostile jets, it would look like Flight 982 was compliant, bending gently eastward. In truth, Emma was carving a narrow arc south, angling them towards safer airspace. Sweat gathered at her brow. Every keystroke felt like a confession. Every line of code was a piece of her old life clawing back into existence. The radio crackled, the distorted voice again. 045 confirmed. Falcon, you learned fast." Emma's lips pressed into a hard line. She said nothing. Let them believe. Let them bask in false control. Outside, the raptors shifted subtly, mirroring the hidden arc. Silent guardians following her lead. Captain Reynolds glanced at the instruments, realization dawning. You're actually doing it." Emma kept her eyes on the screen. "Not yet. If they dig deeper, if they cross-check." The radar beeped. One hostile jet broke formation, circling wide. Emma's heart lurched. "They're checking." The first officer's voice shook. "If they realize." "They will," Emma whispered. The question is when. Her fingers flew faster, layering false echoes, masking signatures. Her pulse hammered, sweat stinging her eyes. She felt the old rhythm return, the rhythm of nights where seconds decided who lived and who didn't. Falcon's rhythm. Behind the cockpit door, passengers stirred. The child cried again, louder this time. An attendant whispered reassurances, her hands shaking. The kind-eyed woman in 17B clutched her hands together, praying without words. The businessman muttered curses into his sleeve, anger masking fear. Emma heard them even through the hum of engines, even through the static of the radio. Their fear pressed against her spine. Their lives hung on her fingers. And the faces returned, the civilians in the village, the children who hadn't survived her last calculation. She saw them in every passenger now, every face another choice, every life another number. Her hands trembled, she whispered through clenched teeth, "Not again, not this time." The hostile jet swept back into formation, its lights blinking. The radio hissed. The voice was sharp now, suspicious. "Falcon, confirm altitude." Emma froze. Her falsified stream hadn't masked that layer. If she answered wrong, they'd know. If she answered right, she'd give them control. The captain's voice cracked. "What do we do?" Emma's breath trembled. Her mind raced, calculating. Then she leaned into the mic, her voice steady, defiant. "Altitude stable, as commanded." A pause, static. Then the voice returned, colder than before. "Falcon, you're lying." The cockpit went silent. Outside, the hostile jets shifted suddenly, their wings glinting sharp in the dawn light. The Raptors broke formation instantly, engines roaring. The sky exploded with motion, predators circling, preparing to strike. Passengers gasped, voices rising behind the cockpit door. Fear spread like fire. Emma's fingers tightened on the console. The lie had been caught. The mask was broken. But Falcon wasn't finished. She typed furiously, her voice low, almost a growl. "Then you should have killed me when you had the chance." Her screen lit with warnings, alarms shrieking. The breach fought back, trying to seize control. She fought harder, overriding, rerouting, forcing every ounce of training into the battle. The cockpit rattled violently as jets tore past, shockwaves slamming the fuselage. Passengers screamed. The child wailed. A tray crashed to the floor. Emma's hands blurred. Sweat poured down her temple. Her chest ached with every breath. The radio crackled again, the hostile voice venomous now. "Falcon, you've chosen death." Emma's eyes burned, but her voice was steel. "No, I've chosen them." And as the hostile jets banked hard, as the Raptors dove to intercept, as the passengers clutched each other in terror, Emma Cole, the waitress from Virginia, the soldier called Falcon, made her choice. Not to run, not to hide, but to fight. What if this was the moment she had been running from all along? What if every night pouring coffee, every forced smile in the diner, every mile eastward across the Atlantic had only been borrowed time leading here? Emma Cole sat in the cockpit of Flight 982, her hands flying across the console, the radio hissing with venomous threats, the fuselage shaking as jets screamed past in violent arcs. Falcon had been hunted. Falcon had been exposed. Now Falcon had to decide whether to live or to give everything away. Outside, the dawn had broken fully, spilling pale light across the endless ocean. It should have been peaceful. Instead, the sky was alive with predators. Raptors darted, banking hard, their afterburners blazing against the pale horizon. Hostile jets slashed across their path, forcing the air itself into battle. Every maneuver rocked the 747, sending passengers into cries of panic. In the cabin, oxygen masks dangled from compartments, swinging like pendulums. A baby wailed. Someone screamed for God. The kind-eyed woman in seat 17B clutched the empty seat beside her, whispering, "Please, please." They didn't know Falcon was sitting up front, fighting with keys and code instead of steel and fire. Captain Reynolds wrestled the yoke, his jaw tight. "We can't take much more of this." The first officer's voice cracked. "They'll tear us apart." Emma's eyes burned with focus. "Not if I blind them first." Her hands blurred, stringing code into the system, forcing false echoes into hostile radar. Every keystroke was a weapon, every override a strike. She remembered long nights in Nevada, guiding drones across hostile skis. This was no different. The battlefield was just closer now. The radio spat static. The hostile voice snarled. "Falcon, last warning, you will comply or burn." Emma's chest tightened. She saw faces in her mind, her passengers, their fear, and she saw the other faces too. The civilians lost years ago, the collateral she had never forgotten. She whispered to herself, fierce and low, "Not again." She pressed the transmit, her voice steady, cold. "If you want Falcon, come and take her." The response came not in words but in action. A hostile jet dove hard, angling directly across their nose. The fuselage jolted, alarms shrieking. Passengers screamed. The Raptors snapped into motion, one braking left, one diving right, intercepting. For a heartbeat, the sky was chaos, trails of exhaust weaving, sunlight flashing on steel. Emma typed faster, flooding false data, creating phantom signatures that danced across enemy screens. The hostile jets hesitated, momentarily fooled, breaking formation to chase ghosts. "Now," Emma barked. "Captain, climb 20 degrees full thrust." Reynolds didn't question. He pulled hard. The engines roared, the 747 straining as it climbed sharply. Passengers cried out, pressed into their seats. Drinks spilled. A cart crashed in the aisle. But the climb bought them space, precious seconds between predator and prey. The first officer's eyes widened at the console. "It's working, they're off us." Then the radar lit again. More signals. Emma's stomach dropped. "They're not alone." 5-6, more aircraft closing fast. Her throat tightened. She had expected hunters, not a swarm. The Raptors roared, engaging immediately. Flashes of fire streaked across the sky, contrails twisting like scars. The 747 shook violently, alarms screaming. Passengers clung to each other, sobbing, praying. Emma's chest burned. She couldn't outcode them all. She couldn't mask a swarm, not without giving everything. Her hands hovered. She whispered to herself, "If I do this, I don't come back, not as Emma, not as Falcon, I just vanish." She looked at Captain Reynolds, sweat streaking his face, holding steady. At the first officer, pale but focused. And she thought of the passengers, the woman in 17B, the boy who thought this was a movie, the elderly couple with their crossword. Her eyes softened. They deserved tomorrow. Her hands dropped to the keys. She opened every layer of code, not just the masks, not just the echoes, the deepest layer, the one she swore never to touch again, the failsafe buried years ago. The letter in her pocket, the last code she had carried, folded like a scar. She typed it in. Line after line, the system roared awake, red warnings flaring. She felt it fighting her, resisting, the breach slamming back like claws. Sweat poured down her temple. Her chest ached, but she pressed harder. The console screamed. Sparks hissed from a panel. The lights flickered. Captain Reynolds shouted, "What are you doing?" Emma's voice was calm, almost soft, ending it. The hostile jets dove in, closing fast. The Raptors intercepted, engines blazing. The sky shook with their fury. Emma slammed the final command. The system froze, then surged. Every hostile screen lit up with ghosts. 100 phantoms appeared, decoys, false aircraft, a swarm of falcons tearing across their radar. The hunters broke formation instantly, chasing illusions, scattering like wolves chasing shadows. The Raptors seized the moment, diving and striking, driving the hostiles further away. The radar blinked. One by one, hostile signals vanished. The cockpit fell into stunned silence. Emma slumped back, her hands trembling, sweat soaking her collar. The console glowed green, stabilized, safe. Captain Reynolds exhaled hard, almost choking on relief. You did it. The first officer's voice cracked, disbelief thick. You saved us. Emma's chest heaved. Her voice was faint, almost distant. I didn't save me. The captain frowned. What do you mean? Emma opened her palm. The folded letter lay there, edges singed from sparks, code burned into memory. That was the last override, the final failsafe. It's gone now, and they know it. They'll know I used it. They'll know where I am. Her voice cracked slightly, but she steadied it. Falcon exposed. Silence filled the cockpit. Outside, the dawn spread brighter, golden light flooding the ocean. The Raptors circled back, steady and calm now, guardians who had done their part. Emma looked out at them, her reflection pale in the glass. She whispered softly, not to the captain, not to the first officer, but to herself. My name is Emma Cole, but Falcon is the name they'll bury me with. The captain's voice was low, almost reverent. You saved 200 souls today. That has to count for something. Emma's lips curved faintly, but it wasn't a smile. Sometimes saving isn't about counting, it's about choosing, and I chose them. She stood slowly, her knees unsteady, and opened the cockpit door. Passengers turned instantly, eyes wide, searching her face. They didn't know her name. They didn't know what she had done. They only knew that danger had passed and that she had walked back among them. The woman in 17B gasped softly, tears filling her eyes. You're back. Emma nodded faintly, sliding into her seat by the window. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Outside, the Raptors dipped their wings in salute before peeling away into the dawn. The sky was clear now, the ocean calm. The passengers exhaled in relief, unaware of the cost. Emma rested her head against the glass, her reflection staring back. She was Falcon, she was Emma, she was both, and neither. She closed her eyes, whispering words she hoped no one else could hear. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And as Flight 982 crossed into safe airspace, the waitress in seat 17A vanished forever. What remained was Falcon, silent, unyielding, and unforgettable.